This video describes 3 Stoic principles for happiness put forward by some of the greatest Stoic philosophers to have ever lived: Marcus Aurelius, Seneca and Epictetus. The first of the 3 principles is Memento Mori, remember that you will die. Back in the day when Roman generals come home from war, they would celebrate all night long. They would celebrate the victory. And their friends would come up to them, the generals, and whisper in their ears, Memento Mori, remember that you will die. And this is a reminder to the generals that this victory is temporary and that more conflicts are yet to come. Therefore, don't get carried away. Remember that you will die. It's not meant to scare you or to make you feel terrible. It's not a negative thing. It's death has this way of grounding you. It has this way of putting things into perspective. In a fable called Solomon's Seal by Edward Fitzgerald, a sultan requests a sentence from King Solomon which would apply to good times as well as bad times. So King Solomon comes up with, "This too shall pass away." So it's a sentence that applies to good times as well as bad times, that the impermanence of things. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, is a famous practitioner of Memento Mori. In a speech, he mentioned the following: "For the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something." Therefore, Memento Mori is to remind you of the impermanence of things, that good times will end, therefore cherish them, and bad times will also end, therefore stay strong and power through them. The second principle is called cognitive distancing. Epictetus describes that wise action can only be taken when you can differentiate between reality, actual reality, and your perception of reality. This is known as cognitive distancing. When something happens in your life, good or bad, separate yourself from the sudden thoughts that tend to come up and realize that what's happening is actually a mental representation of what's actually happening. It's like wearing tinted, colored spectacles. If you're wearing dark and gloomy spectacles, you see the world in a dark and gloomy way. And if you wear that for a long period of time, we tend to forget that we are even wearing spectacles. And we tend to think that the world itself is perceived by everyone else in a dark and gloomy way. So what happens is we find it difficult to differentiate between the actual world, which is the normal world, versus the dark and gloomy world that we see, which is our perception of the world. The differentiation is what really creates the cognitive distance. For example, if someone offends you, just take a step back and realize that you got offended not because of their feedback, but you got offended because you expected the opposite from them. Like you expected praise from people, but when you receive mixed feedback from them, you realize that, it's actually the problem is within myself and not in their feedback. You realize that it's not the feedback that actually affected you, it's your expectation of them. The third and final Stoic principle for happiness is to see the present moment in isolation. Marcus Aurelius describes this as the following: "Remind yourself that it is not the future nor the past which weighs upon you, but always the present, and this present will seem smaller to you if you circumscribe it by defining and isolating it." That's a bit like saying, I just need to get through this one moment at a time. By focusing on what's present to us rather than worrying about the future, we can take things step by step and overcome obstacles that might otherwise seem overwhelming. It's the act of diluting down present moments that may seem big at first. You dilute it down to the fundamentals and make it digestible. An example is, if you're faced with a huge problem, if you can dilute it down to the reasons as to why it's stressing you out or giving you anxiety, you can approach it step by step and therefore not get overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem that you're facing. And this also applies to emotional control. An example for this is, if you see a bottle of wine and you're attracted to it, you're infatuated with the idea of drinking it, like you're excited to drink it, you want to taste it. But if you take a step back and look at it for what it actually is, it's just crushed grapes and fermented liquid that's kept for a long period of time. Suddenly that bottle of wine loses the seductive nature. Like you're not attracted to what it is anymore, because like you see the fundamentals of it's just grape juice. It's just kept for a long period of time. It's just a bottle of liquid. And suddenly it loses that seductive nature. Another example is, if you see someone beautiful and you're attracted to that person, you're infatuated with the idea of them and you want to have them. But if you take a step back and look at it in a different perspective, you realize that it's just another person who endures pain and suffering just like you. But what makes them different is just a genetic difference. That's their beauty. But they endure pain and suffering, and they go through the same hardships, and they experience impermanence as well. Suddenly that seductive nature is just gone. Suddenly you see things for what it is. It's not beauty anymore, it's just genetic difference, but they are the same thing as you. Like, they go through the same things as you. When you do this, the seductive nature no longer controls your emotions, but you start taking control of your own emotions. So these 3 principles have helped me a lot. And if you can include these 3 principles in your daily habits and your thought patterns, there's a high possibility that you attain happiness on a daily basis, and that you start seeing things for what it is, and you see positive things in negative moments, and you'll find the strength to get through hardships. So if you're new here, my name is Zinuka J, and I create videos involving self-development and positivity, and I try to spread awareness on things that work for me and things that don't work for me. I try to shed as much light as I can on my failures as well as my successes, so that maybe you guys can join with me and change a couple of things in your life if there's anything to be changed. So if you enjoyed this video, place a comment down below and let me know your thoughts, and maybe share this with a friend. That's it, guys. I hope you guys have an amazing day ahead. I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later.